2022 was certainly an interesting year for Paladins. We had some highs and a whole lot of lows. To start us off, I want to give you guys some stats. This is the Steam Charts website. It shows you how many people are engaging with games on Steam, and also gives us some insight into the peak and average player counts. The graph at the top shows the peak player count for the month, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to refer to the average player count of each month. Stats you can see on your screen right now. Over the past year, Paladins lost 48% of its average player count on Steam. That's very concerning. Now before you comment bomb me, I am aware that Steam Charts isn't 100% accurate, and that since Paladins is cross-platform, the graph only represents a portion of its players. But still, this gives us a general insight towards the health of the game, and let's just say, it's not looking good. So, what led to this? Let's review the year and find out. Starting with new champions. I'm gonna talk about the champs in regards to originality and not balance. Don't worry, we'll get there. To roll in 2022, our first new champion was the flanker 7. 7 was the first champion to feature not one, not two, but 3 forms of fire from his weapon, the heavy SMG. You have the burst mode for long-range engagements, the mag dump for close range, and the auto fire for mid-range. 7 could change between these fire modes at will, via his trigger discipline skill. 7 was also the first flanker since Koga to feature 2 movement skills. However, unlike other flanks, these skills were multifunctional. First is the explosive dodge, which is a horizontal dash that leaves behind some C4 mines on the ground to damage enemies who may be pursuing you. Second is the grappling hook, which functions akin to a Grover/Vora vine, but also allows 7 to stick to walls and become stealthed upon doing so. Also on release, 7 could use his grappling hook on enemies to pull them closer to him, akin to Makoa's hook without the stun. Overall, 7 was a very bloated, but very unique addition to the Paladins roster. After 7, we retreated to the damage champ Betty La Bomba, our first blaster champ since Dredge. Unfortunately, most of Betty's skills feel recycled from other champs. The primary fire grenade launcher is very similar to Pip/Dredge, the secondary cluster bomb is very similar to a Willow Seedling/Dredge broadside, the explosive personality is a mash between Buck's Leap and Pip's Weightless, and the most unique aspect of Betty is her hail of bombs, which will cause bombs to randomly jump out of the thrown magazine. Despite not being super unique, I think the abilities mesh well together, and I consider Betty to be a fun champion released this year. Following Betty was the support champion Lilith. Lilith's unique gimmick is her passive blood health. Instead of normal HP, most of Lilith's health pool consists of blood health. This health is the resource that Lilith uses to cast her abilities. Lilith's primary fire is the Heart of Crimson, which is just another basic projectile weapon. The Blood Hex is akin to a Genos Mark that you could use on either allies for healing or enemies for damage. The Deathwings is yet another Buck Leap, but get this, you can step on people for pitiful damage. And the Swarm is just a better Maldamba Gourd. The Blood Moon Ultimate brings the first of its kind stat to the game though. Upon activation, Lilith and her allies will gain 35% pure lifesteal that is unaffected by anti-healing. Despite having to micromanage her health, all of Lilith's abilities are recycled, and therefore I don't consider her to be a unique champion release. After Lilith, we received our second flank for the year, Caspian. This is the champion I was the most hyped for in a long time, because Caspian is the first champion since Terminus to feature a melee weapon as one of his primaries. Caspian's weapon combo is the Gun and Sword Love and War. Dealing damage with one weapon increases the attack speed of the other through Caspian's momentum passive. This creates an interesting dynamic where you need to weave in attacks from both weapons to keep your attack speed up. His first skill, Rogue's Tempo, fires out a projectile that stuns enemies. Caspian is actually the only flank who has access to a stun in their base set of skills. Last of the basic skills is Caspian's Deadly Momentum, where you dash and twirl to deal damage and attempt to reposition. If he wasn't so clunky to play, Caspian would have easily been my favorite champion released this year. I think his kit is very unique and has the potential to be very fun. Last of the new champions released this year is our second damage dealer, Kasumi. Kasumi's primary fire, Yokai Doll, was the first of its kind for Paladins. Instead of shooting something out of the weapon like other champions, the targeting on the skill functioned similarly to many supports' healing abilities. You had a hard range limit on your attack, but as long as your opponent was in range, you could hit them with the auto-aim targeting cone, whatever you want to call it. To compensate for the ease of use, Kasumi had to ramp up her damage. For each hit she gets on an opponent, she will generate a stack of curse. The more curse stacks an enemy has, the more damage Kasumi's yokai doll will do. Additionally, each stack of curse lowers the enemy's damage by 2%. A damage debuff stat on a primary fire is the first of its kind for Paladins. Kasumi's secondary fire is the Savage Tear, which functions just like the primary fire. However, at max stacks, the ability disarms opponents for 1 second. This first of its kind stat stops the enemy from using their primary fire in that time frame. Next is Kasumi's repositioning skill, Body and Soul, in which Kasumi leaves her main body behind and enters a ghastly state to move around unharmed. Kasumi's original body can be damaged and killed, but she gains high damage reduction during the ability. Last of the basic abilities is the Spirit Lures. Kasumi can place up to 3 traps on the battlefield. If an enemy triggers a trap, Kasumi can teleport to the trap to damage and fear nearby opponents. Kasumi's playstyle makes you feel like you're a ghost in a horror film, chasing down helpless victims. Because of that, I consider her a win in the uniqueness department. Balance-wise, that's a whole nother story, but we'll get to that. Unfortunately, we did not receive a new frontline this past year, but judging by how poorly balanced the last 2 were on release, maybe it was a good thing. After almost 3 years, we finally got a new map added to the game. The new siege map Dawnforge was added just recently in our latest patch. The point fight of Dawnforge has some unique environmental hazards that distinguish it from other siege maps. The main one being the star, that players can send over the point to pressure anyone on it, as well as cutting off sightlines from the high ground. You also have the forge constantly slamming down, making that area risky for taking fights. Visually, the map is stunning, and it's awesome to see a new map in the game after so long. Next, I want to talk about the story, otherwise known as lore, and how that progressed for 2022. Surprisingly, the year started out incredibly strong lore-wise. After Yagurath's defeat, Karn, the leader of the Magistrate, stepped down and gave the position of Grand Magister to Leon of House Ico. Unfortunately, House Ico are racist towards Skadrin, so on top of a new Magistrate, a new resistance is formed, with Zin seemingly being at the head. I say seemingly because this wasn't confirmed, and the story did not progress much further with the lore provided via Champion releases. Starting with 7, he is the top executioner of the Magistrate and is sent to murder Corvus, and seemingly succeeds. Kinda. Because in Lilith's trailer, Leon calls upon the former Border Lord, now Abyssal Vampire Lilith, to save Corvus's life. Then Caspian shows up and steals an Abyssal crown that seemingly belongs to Lilith's Abyssal Master, and possible first champion of 23. Then Kasumi pops up and decides to murder a Magistrate soldier. Kasumi's lore hints that she was betrayed by House Ico and has returned for revenge. But this isn't necessarily confirmed because her lore blurb mentions a house, not specifically House Ico. Oh yeah, another former Border Lord, Betty Lobomba, showed up to take back her kingdom and murder some not Bomb Kings. So far the lore seems to be hinting at unrest within the new Magistrate, with Leon opting to resurrect the war criminal, as well as the concept of Border Lords being brought up for the first time. Well, all of that is inadequate, because when we got the Dawnforge map, we also got some lore to go along with it. Basically, since the realm couldn't handle Yagurath, Azan decided that the realm would not be able to handle the Abyss, and has thus opted to create the mobile fortress Dawnforge to purge the realm. Yeah, that took a wild spin. Outside of the blurbs and trailers, the in-game lore through champion voice lines was almost non-existent this year. Instead, we have Kasumi asking if there's an afterlife for trees.
Will you tell me if there's an afterlife for trees?
It was kind of disappointing to see the lore not really go anywhere, but that is to be expected of Paladins, so I can't really diss them for that. The ideas presented, at least the inner struggle within the Magistrate, does have the potential to be quite interesting. I am always harping on about how Paladins need some new, permanent game modes. Well, at the start of the year, we got new game modes. Kinda. As the name of the first patch of the year implies, every other patch cycle we were supposed to be treated to a schism. The first schism was Siege Beyond. This mode had 2 variants. The first variant was a different take on the item store, featuring a linear track of items to buy, akin to MOBAs. The idea was not my favorite, as a lot of the items were confusing, and sometimes you wouldn't get what you needed until late into the match. Think Chronos on supports, or Wrecker against the shield-heavy team. The second variant of Siege Beyond attempted to rekindle a mechanic from the alpha days of Paladins, a destructible siege cart. In these matches, the point fight would progress as normal. Once the payload spawned in, it would move automatically to the checkpoint. Enemies could only stop the cart by damaging and ultimately destroying it. Once destroyed, 2 capture points would spawn, and the attackers would have to take a zone to respawn their cart. While this version was an interesting concept, the mode failed for 2 reasons in my eyes. One is that our current siege maps are too small for a game mode that was originally made with huge maps in mind. And second is that damage has gone up dramatically since the alpha days. 1 exterminate beam was all it took to take the cart from 100% to 0. After this schism, the next one featured the return of the Siege of Ascension Peak LTM, and then schisms faded away, forgotten. Ultimately, I am very disappointed by the schisms. So much energy and resources was put into Siege Beyond, when in reality, the game needs to move beyond Siege, with some actual new game modes. Speaking of game modes, we got a major adjustment to one of them. Recently in the Dawnforge patch, Team Deathmatch was changed to use the rule set from Pick Any, meaning you could stack as many of one champion as you want. I personally was not in favor of this change. The Pick Any LTM was incredibly fun, possibly the best LTM we've had yet, but its inclusion as a mainstay game mode shouldn't have come at the cost of the base TDM in my eyes. Also, I think the game mode plays better in Siege. To continue, I want to talk about skins/event passes this year. The Paladins art team must have heard our complaints about the lack of skin distribution amongst all the champs, because this year over 70% of the roster received a new skin. In 2022, 37 out of 52 champions got a new skin. For our mainline event passes, the themes were Abyss Hunter Academy, featuring anime high school skins, Lost Future, featuring what-if skins, showcasing what certain champs would look like if the realm fell to darkness, STARFORGED, showing an astral constellation type theme, Dread Omens, featuring some spooky skins, and Chaos Rising, featuring some more Abyss-themed skins, I think. In terms of themes, I think the art team did a good job. My personal favorite was the Lost Future Pass. I thought those skins looked very unique and cool. Of course, we can't mention event passes without talking about our crossovers for the year. Paladins had 3 crossovers when it came to skins this year. The first was with the Rainbow series, featuring a skin for Victor. The second was with Monster Cat the Music Company, which featured skins for Sky and Khan in the Battle Pass, as well as skins for Cassie, Moji, Androxus, and Koga. Our final crossover for the year, and the most notable, was the crossover pass with the Ruby series, featuring skins for Amani, Sky, Vora, and Sati as the main characters of the show. On top of that, there was a skin for Ceres and Corvus. Now this crossover, let's just say it was, and still is, a bit controversial. So, the 4 skins featured in the pass, they weren't made for Paladins. They were made for Smite, and it shows. Especially when you compare them to the 2 skins for Ruby that were not in Smite previously. The worst offender has to be Yang Xiaolong Amani. Look at that sleep-deprived face, that mop she calls a wig, and the gauntlets. Do not use them with another skin. Actually, do not mix and match anything on this skin, because you'll either get differing skin tones, or a part of Amani's arms will be gone! Apparently, the decision to port the skins directly from Smite was decided by Rooster Teeth, the media company responsible for Ruby. I just want to say, shame on whoever okayed that decision. The Ruby skins from the past are easily the worst to enter Paladins, and it's a shame for the Ruby fans wanting to play as their favorite character. Jumping away from the passes, this year saw the return of epic skins, as I call them, from the beta days. These skins are based upon the champion's base model, but lack a unique voice pack or weapon. Some people were not a fan of these, but I personally love the idea. It's a great way to divvy up skin distribution without investing too many resources, and it shows with how many champs got skins this year. My only complaint with these skins is that you cannot swap the voice packs like you could in the beta days. This Fatu skin, for example, would work so well with the voice pack from the Demon skin. What I believe kickstarted the return of epic skins was 7. With the Schism update, 7 launched with 7 unique skins. He is the only champion to do so, because the trend immediately stopped with Betty La Bomba. I find it weird that Paladins would set up this new expectation and then immediately drop it. It's just like the Star Sisters Battle Pass, where only those 4 skins have recolor options. That was just a weird decision I wanted to bring up. To wrap up skins, let's talk about specific skin distributions. This year had some massive wins for our underdogs. Willow started out the year strong with her new robot skin as 2022's ranked reward. I suffered through 75 wins of that hell to get it, only for them to release a better looking recolor in the bounty shop. Atlas received 2 skins via the Lost Futures Pass, his first skin since his release, I believe. Moji and Cassie received Monster Cat skins after a long skin drought, and Terminus got 2 skins from the Constellations patch after another long skin drought. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be a year of Paladins without the Golden Children receiving even more skins. Ying got a skin, Leon got skins, Khan got skins, Androxus got a skin, Zin got skins, Ceres got a skin, and just when we thought they were going to shake up the hierarchy, Tyra squeezed in 2 skins via the Chaos Rising Pass. Damn, so close, you almost missed your quota, guys. Despite my minor grievances, this year was amazing for skins. My personal favorite is Cuddly Yaggorath. So far, everything I said is mostly positive. That doesn't correlate as to why Paladins might be losing players. So, what does? Since Paladins doesn't get new content in the form of new permanent game modes, in my opinion, the state of the game's balance and stability is what will dictate if players leave or stay. And I just want to say, 2022 was the worst year of balancing and bugs by far. How about we start with the beyond wretched balancing this year? Let's highlight the new champions first. Release 7 was incredibly strong. On release, the Mag Dump could deal up to 2,000 damage in a single burst. Comboed with Deft Hands and his reload speed card, 7 could melt even Yaggorath extremely quickly. If enemies weren't in position to be Mag Dumped, 7 could remedy this easily with his release grapple pulling in enemies. To further add to the frustration was 7's extreme mobility. These 2 loadout cards reduce the cooldown of 7's movement skills when he uses the other skill. Enter the spring-loaded talent. On top of now placing 2 sets of traps with a larger AoE, the talent's strongest aspect is the base cooldown reduction to the explosive dodge. With the talent and loadout cards capped, 7 can quite literally fly all over the place. On release, 7s would pull you in with Hook, smash 2,000 damage in your face with the Mag Dump, and if that didn't kill you, then the bombs from explosive dodge would. If by a miracle all of that didn't kill you, 7 could easily reposition with his second grappling hook. Oh yeah, 7's grapple has 2 charges to it. Meanwhile, Vora has to pick a talent to do that. On release, it was easily the most bloated ability added to this game. It gave mobility, stealth, displacement, and damage. So, all of this sounds pretty insane, right? Like, 7's power level should have been brought down a bit after release. Well, the Paladins balance team didn't think so at first, because the first few patches of the year featured mostly buffs for 7. His ultimate got buffed, Burst and Auto-Fire got buffs, then a massive buff to the explosive dodge, which lets you use it while airborne. Finally, in October, 7's power was brought in line. The explosive dodge's knockback was cut by 50%, grappling hook's damage was lowered, and the big one, hooking in opponents was removed from the base kit and delegated to a talent. Now, if a 7 player wants to hook people in like the old times, you have to pick the overcharged talent, which removes 1 charge of grapple, so if you go for the hook, you have to commit to it. On top of that, you also lose the massive benefits of the spring-loaded talent. Because of these changes, 7 players have adapted by focusing on his hypermobility via the spring-loaded talent and cooldown reductions. Even though I and many others are happy that 7 was brought down, I am a bit saddened by the state of his hook. Don't get me wrong, it was super frustrating to face, but it was also very unique to 7. Hopefully 2023 brings some healthy buffs towards the overcharged talent to sort of bring back that playstyle. Following 7, we had Betty, who initially was not much of a problem balance-wise. The most frustration players faced was from her Hail of Bombs ability, or as I call it, the random BS Go attack. The skill is essentially a variation of Tara's Molotov, which is already a frustrating ability to face. Luckily, the damage was brought down a bit shortly after release. After Betty, we had Lilith, who felt pretty clunky to play as on release. My main issue with Lilith comes from the Swarm. The idea is that you charge up the ability, and the longer it's charged, the more healing and damage it does. But, if you opt to not fully charge it, the Swarm will still consume the same amount of blood health as the fully charged variant. That just seems weird to me. Another issue I have with Lilith is her customization. A majority of her loadout cards, and all of her talents, have drawbacks. I get the whole give and take idea they were going for, but I'm not a fan of the execution. As of right now, Lilith is the only champion that I want to play without a talent. I genuinely do not like any of her talents. If you thought Lilith was clunky, you ain't seen nothing. Enter Caspian. First off, Caspian is the first champion since Terminus to be primarily melee-based, since most of his damage comes from the sword. Well, Caspian has less than average base HP at 2100 with no loadout card to increase it. And I know some of you are saying, oh, but he's a flanker, so less health equals better mobility. Enter Deadly Momentum, the worst movement skill in this game by far. On paper, the ability seems like any other dash. Zip in a direction and spin to deal some damage. Well, first off, the base ability is super slow without cards, and second, the little twirl Caspian does at the end halts all of your momentum. The ability is called Deadly Momentum. It's just such a questionable balance decision. Who tested this and thought that was a fun idea? Another questionable decision is the Rogue's Tempo ability. The projectile fired out moves faster based on how many momentum stacks you have. At base, it moves so slowly, and with stacks, it matches the speed of your primary fire. Just another weird decision. There's no indicator on if Caspian has stacks or not, so why not make it easier for both players and opponents by having the projectile be at a consistent speed? I would also like to address the fact that Caspian is the only flanker to have hard CC in his base kit. Other flankers have access to CC via talents or ultimates, but none in their base kit. The stun is a great point of frustration both playing as and against Caspian. Pretty much his whole playstyle boils down to hit the stun or die. And with Caspian concluded, we get to the biggest balance nightmare of the year. Let me take a breath for this one. Kasumi. Release Kasumi was an extreme problem. For three major reasons. The first and most obvious is her primary and secondary skills. Unlike other primary fires, the Yokai doll used a targeting cone akin to support's healing abilities. What this meant is that you could be extremely off-target and still guarantee damage. The weapon also features no ammo count or recharge in between shots, so you're free to hold the primary button until something connects. On top of that, with each hit confirmed, Kasumi would apply a stack of curse to the opponent. For each stack of curse, the Yokai doll would do more damage, and the enemy afflicted with curse would deal less outgoing damage. At 5 stacks of curse, Kasumi's Savage Tear will disarm the opponent for 1 second, eliminating the option for retaliation. But wait, that's not it for the utility Kasumi provides. Her Spirit Lures can fear opponents when triggered, making it super easy for Kasumi and her team to guarantee damage on you while your champion is helpless. On top of a very strong base kit, Kasumi has 2 very strong talents. The first talent, Empowered Curse, grants Kasumi move speed and attack speed for each stack of curse, making her damage even more potent. And the second, Spirit Bombs, makes the Spirit Lures timed mines that automatically fear opponents who touch them. My god, writing all this out really gave me a picture on why so many players, myself included, despise this champion. Kasumi has had some nerfs with the latest Dawnforge patch, the main one being the targeting cone on Yokai doll being brought down, but in my opinion, Kasumi needs drastic balance changes or a soft rework to be both viable and less frustrating. Possible video idea in the future. Now that we're done talking about the cesspool known as New Champion Balance, we arrive at my favorite traveling circus, also known as Haven Veteran. Unfortunately, that showstopper continued this year. Haven got its DR scaling upped from 5.5 to 6%, as well as a price increase going from 300 to 350 credits. Veteran followed suit with a scaling and cost increase, because the best way to combat everyone complaining about Haven Vet is simply to buff them. In case you guys don't know why Haven/Veteran is complained about, let me give you some insight. A standard health champion has 2,200 HP. Veteran 3 grants 16.5% bonus HP, so that 2,002 is brought up to 2,563. Haven 3 grants 18% damage reduction, so comboed with Max Haven, that 2,563 effectively becomes 3,024 health. Yeah, that's a problem when most champs' HP pools are a critical factor towards their balancing. Because of the balance team's refusal to address Haven Veteran or #BringBackGlassShields, many champions had to be power crept to keep up damage-wise. A key example of this is Victor. Victor is a champion that historically has not been changed very much. Now all of a sudden we're buffing his damage because he can't keep up. Another example of this is Betty. Yes, on release, Betty's grenade launcher damage at 600 was kinda low. It was rightfully buffed to 650 where it felt fine. But then, just recently, the devs buffed it again to 700 damage. Other champions who got their damage power crept over the year include Seven, Tiberius, Genos, and Tyra. Unfortunately, we're not past the worst offenders yet. Does anyone remember Oppression Kanessa? In the Heart of Darkness patch, Kanessa's lame Eagle Eye talent was replaced with Oppression. On release, Oppression allowed Kanessa to throw out 2 additional mines per use of the ability, making the total number of mines out at once go up from 2 to 4. Everyone, and I mean everyone, complained about this. Not so much for the damage, Oppressor mines do next to nothing. But the visual clutter. Holy moly, the visual clutter when you face this talent is absurd. Despite everyone's complaints from the PTS, that feedback was ignored and the talent went to live and ruined countless matches. Luckily next patch, the Paladins devs put some nerfs towards Kanessa's mines, as well as a band-aid fix towards the Oppressor talent, with those mines now having a 6-second uptime, effectively killing the talent. You can accomplish the same goal of tagging multiple people with mines via loadout cards. While it was incredibly frustrating to fight, I am disappointed by the state of Oppression. I think the talent had potential. Then, we get to the Androxus Revolver rework. So previously, all Androxus players would run the Cursed Revolver talent, because let's face it, the base semi-auto revolver sucked. Horrible range, bad damage, annoying spread, etc. So, the devs decided to put the Cursed Revolver into Andro's base kit. Rightfully so. I'm of the mentality that if a certain card or talent is required for a champion to be borderline playable, then it should be base kit. Unfortunately, the devs did not properly balance for the massive boost in power Andro was about to receive. Yes, they did lower the revolver's damage from 600 to 550, but that was such a small damage nerf. Keep in mind, Cursed Revolver used to be a talent that many players would dominate with. Now, you can run that with another talent. Speaking of talents, the new Cursed Revolver was one of the dumbest talent changes I've seen in this game in a long time. So, we established that while small, the devs did make a point to lower Andro's damage for his new revolver. Well, here's a talent that gives Andro more damage! Bleeding damage that scales up based on consecutive hits. Betty LaBomba has literally the same talent, but her damage doesn't scale. So, with the new scaling dot damage, Andro was doing more damage than before. And with the dot damage, Ninny Andro players would still confirm kills on targets that managed to take cover. Even though the talent got nerfed, it is still frustrating to fight. Personal opinion here, but anytime Androxus is good, the game is not fun. It's been this way as early as the punch meta from OB67. Hopefully Season 6 brings another rework to this talent, or nerfs it into the ground. Another set of questionable changes this year was to Grover in the Ruby update. Prior to this, Grover's problem was the incredible utility provided from the Deep Root's talent. The root made it very easy for Grover's team to confirm kills. All Grover needed was some tweaks to the talent to be in a healthier spot. Instead, Grover's burst healing on Blossom went down from 800 to 650, but now it has a measly 300 healing over time effect for reasons. His crippling throw had its damage upped by 25 for reasons. And not one, but 2 talents were reworked. Rampant Blooming no longer provides a bonus heal over time on Blossom, since that went to base kit, and now heals for a burst of 500, then 300 over 2 seconds after you use Vine. Deep Roots got completely gutted. Despite the name, the talent no longer roots enemies. It keeps the idea of chaining your crippling throw hits, but now spawns a healing aura around chain hits, not the initial, that heals allies for a pathetic 100 health per second. Most loadout cards heal more than that. On top of that, the range of this healing aura is pitiful, and it's extremely difficult to tell when it's manifested. Now, all Grover is good for is heal botting, and that's extremely boring. Last of the questionable changes here, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this, is the changes to Ceres. The old Agony talent went into the base kit. This talent allowed Ceres' Ren Soul to stun opponents after hitting 4 Soul Orbs on them. Now that it's in the base kit, Ceres' power has skyrocketed. Previously, Ceres' problem was the lack of utility, a problem I was okay with, considering Ceres' ease of use and great healing numbers. Now with the stun in base kit, Ceres has great healing, good damage and tankiness via Soul Collector, and hard crowd control with the stun. My stream chat is always joking that Ceres got Agony put in the base kit instead of the often necessary Veil card. Again, I'd like to know your thoughts on this because my community is split on this one. Overall, I feel that all these negative changes could have been avoided or at least reduced if the Paladins team took feedback from the PTS. It's called the Public Test Realm, but feels like the Public Trial Realm. because ultimately, all the changes will go into the live game, despite player backlash. Alright, that was a ton of negativity. Let's cancel that out with some positivity, because despite all the horrid changes, there were some truly amazing ones hidden in the patch notes. First, and possibly a controversial one, was the removal of Cauterize as an item, and its introduction as a passive effect that scales as the match goes on. I loved this change then, and I still love it today. Cauterize was the only item that every champion needed to buy. A team without Cauterize would get slaughtered by one that had it. Now, I feel free to pick whichever item I want at the start of the match, without the worry of, oh crap, I didn't buy Cauterize, hope their Ceres isn't good. Another one of my favorites from early this year was the removal of the cripple from Tyra's Burn Monster talent. Thank Genos. I was listening to that update showcase in the car, and when I heard that change, I started clapping like a lunatic. The guy next to me at the red light gave me such a weird look. Continuing on, I loved the long-awaited return of Genos' Astral Mark going to 220 heals a second. Whoever decided to lower it to 180 all those years ago, what were they on? Now for my favorite talent change, that was for Rom's Subservience. The old garbage used to only heal allies extremely close to you for 100 health per soul. The new talent has no range limit and ignores line of sight. Anytime Rom collects a soul, all living allies are healed for 2% of their max health. Such a simple but very fun change. And one last little one, the buff to Torvald's Eldritch Speed card early in the year. Now Torvald has a little bit of movement, and this has massively helped his viability in my eyes. There were plenty of great balance changes this year, but this vid would be too long if I mentioned all of them. Our final section here before we wrap up is bugs. As stated earlier, this year was the worst year for bugs by far. The most notable bug was the sound bug. Very often, champion sounds wouldn't load, causing them to be silent for the whole match. Picture Release 7 and all his bloated stats, coming at you completely silent. Unfortunately, this wasn't a rare bug, it was extremely common. Like every game common. To make matters even worse, this bug was not handled immediately. It persisted for a few months. This time frame was when Paladins hit its all-time low for me. It was incredibly frustrating to play, and I basically stopped recording it for that time. Some other bugs relating to new champions this year include Betty's animations completely breaking after using her ult, Lilith's Swarm not properly charging, forcing you to place an uncharged variant. Her Death Wings also has a weird interaction where if you go for the stomp, you're pulled back slightly. Oh, almost forgot to talk about her first talent, Cursed Accord, not functioning properly. The talent says that it increases your healing by 15%. Except, that's only applied to the Swarm, because on the Blood Hex, only the first tick is increased by 15. All the other ticks scale like normal. Caspian had an issue with his ammo, where you could not reload. His ultimate also states that it fires piercing projectiles when it doesn't. Kasumi has a ton of camera bugs when you use Body and Soul. And for my main Amani, the Infernal Cannon momentum bug has not been fixed. And now, we're treated to the missing arms bug, where anytime you go to first person from third, your arms will disappear for a short time. That's not distracting! Oh yeah, also as per usual, we had plenty of Trials of the Realm challenges not functioning. So going back to the graph, why did Paladins suffer a massive loss in players during 2022? In my personal opinion, there were three major factors. The Horde balancing, 7 specifically was raining hell for far too long. The atrocious state of bugs, again, the sound bug ran rampant for far too long. And the last one, Overwatch 2 released, and why wouldn't players go and try out the new, more polished, free-to-play shooter game? I've said this countless times, but the 2 years that Overwatch was down and out should have been the best years that Paladins had to offer. Instead, features got removed, questionable balance ensued, and no new game modes were added. Hopefully with Overwatch 2 making a stand in the market, it forces some friendly competition from Paladins. I don't want to sound like a doom and gloomer, but if Season 6 is a flop, I will genuinely worry for the future of this game, because obviously, spitting out skins and champions ain't cutting it. And that's my review of Paladins in 2022. Sorry to be so negative, but hopefully 23 and Season 6 has some treats in store for us. What was your favorite part of Season 5 and your least favorite? Let me know down below. Don't forget to clap that like button and lace down that sub button. Setting the bell is also a great way to stay in the loop. As always, I'm YellowNinja, and peace.